Let's go ahead and finish up the semester by talking about healthcare. And the two problems that we have with healthcare are cost, which was alluded to in those discussion boards with cost of drugs, cost of surgery, I mean, what have you, and access. Okay, can you get the care you need? They are related because high costs limit access. One of the problems with cost, and to be fair, was tried to be resolved with the some regulations that the Trump administration passed. Is think about it. How much does it cost for an MRI? How much does it cost for an X-ray? How much does it cost for, put in there whatever you want, the COVID vaccine? What does it cost? Okay, well, the COVID vaccine costs nothing. It's free, what have you. You know more about the price of a gallon of gas than you do about the cost of an X-ray, what have you. Things like a cavity. What's a cavity cost? What's it cost to fill a cavity? A root canal. Okay, all of a sudden, they don't advertise prices. Okay, go to, the hospital websites are supposed to now have a spot where you can check. Okay, and the last article I read about it probably a couple of months ago said it's still very hard to navigate. Some hospitals have it buried. Okay, but the bottom line is cost and access are some issues, and they are related. Now, once again, the data is old, okay? And I specifically, I thought about trying to update some of the data, and I go, no, because you had Obamacare in the 2010, and then Trump trying to repeal it. Now you've got COVID, so there's just a lot of stuff that's happened. So I left the data the way it is, but I want to point out a couple of things about this. Notice in 62, you paid a lot of money out of pocket. Okay, keep in mind, Medicare and Medicaid didn't exist. They were late 60s. Okay. And notice what's happened to private insurance. Okay, private insurance is gone and had the bigger increases. Now the key is, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, one of the problems with healthcare is you get it through work. And so the obvious question is, okay, why do we get healthcare through work? And it really goes back to World War II. During World War II, the US government passed wage ceilings. They said you cannot pay whatever the market will bear. There was a maximum wage you could pay. And the reason was, to be quite fair, men were overseas. Okay, there was a small labor supply. Theoretically, they could have charged. They could have, the workers that were here, men or women, could have charged outrageous prices, and the U.S. government would have had to pay it because there were no other workers. They were all overseas fighting. So what companies did to get around that price ceiling, and go back to price ceilings, and we talked about people trying to get around them. What would happen is that employers said, the most I can pay you is X, but I can toss in this thing called health insurance. If you come work for me, I'll toss it in. It's a freebie. And then I can tell the government I didn't pay them more than X, but I just gave them that free health insurance. That's how it became associated with your employment. Okay. So the way it got associated with your employment is because they were trying to get around the economics, if you will, of price ceilings. Now we can talk, and there are, if the interesting thing about this is, and this is wait times, Boston, and in fact, it wasn't just Boston, it was Massachusetts that kind of had the first, okay, everybody has to have insurance, okay? They were the first to have some version, if you will, of Obamacare, okay, or the Healthcare Act, Okay. And notice what happened to wait times. Okay. The idea is if everybody, think about it from another perspective, and this is possibly a huge issue at some point. If everybody has health insurance and it costs absolutely nothing, what does it cost to go to the doctor? Nothing other than your weight. So how do you end up paying for it then? You end up paying for it with a weight. If you're not going to pay for it with dollars, you end up paying for it in wait times. Now, so far, we haven't had that happen here, okay? Because even with, healthcare, what have you, the trip to the doctor is not free, okay? Now, one of the things to realize is that a lot of the uninsured are relatively young. Keep in mind, everybody over 65 is covered through Medicare. Okay. The very, very poor are covered in most states through Medicaid. Okay. So you've got the very old that are covered, the very poor that are covered. Okay. So you've got kind of this middle group that are not going to be covered. Many of them are young. And think about it from their perspective. And I know, about half the class today is going to fit into that age group. You have a choice. You can spend, and I'm just going to make up a number, $300 a month for insurance. Okay, that's $3,600 a year. You'll probably never use it. Some of you might. If you get cancer or something, bad happens, yeah. But for many young people, they don't go to the doctor all that often. Or you can spend that $3,600 on one blowout vacation. Economics is about choices. You're 18 to 34. The chances of you getting sick, hurt, needing the insurance are relatively small. And keep in mind, that if you do end up, in the emergency, whatever, they're not going to turn you away and say you don't have money. Okay, they're going to have to, fix the broken arm, so to speak, whatever. You spend the $3,600 on health insurance where there's no benefit, or do you spend the $3,600 on a blowout vacation? What's the rational thing to do? Go without insurance. Okay. And 16% have incomes, a good percentage have incomes over 75 grand. Okay. Now, as we approached, and this is kind of leading into Obamacare and what have you, if you think about it, okay, changing the uninsured by household income between 93 and 2003. Look at who was going uninsured. And part of the reason was because cost, especially for a family. Okay, the cost in Virginia of the Virginia health insurance plan for one person is probably about $600 a month. Per person. Okay, couple is about $1,200 to $1,500. When you get to a family, it's close to $2 grand. Okay, and that's the state of insurance. That's the state Virginia health insurance plan. Well, at $2 grand for a family, that's 24 grand a year. That's a third of that, 75 grand in income. And for 24 grand a year, I can get one heck of a nice vacation for my family. Okay. So once again, leading into Obamacare, what have you, somewhere between 14 and 15% are without health insurance. And I've seen the numbers today, and they're, within the last 2 years, boy, the numbers have been all over the place because of people losing their jobs and what have you. But in general, okay, it was 14, 15%. So what are some of the issues here? One, our healthcare costs are going up, which they are all over the place. What does that do? Well, it reduces access. Why? Higher costs mean it's harder to get, to the doctor, whatever. Or an HMO or a PPO may even limit the doctors you can go to. It has an impact on labor market. And you really saw this about 10 years ago. Keep in mind, we just saw last week, the company said the marginal revenue product equal the marginal resource cost. And that marginal, from the employer standpoint, that marginal resource cost includes at least wages plus Social Security taxes plus benefits. Okay. And to the extent those benefits include health care, that gets included in the cost of hiring you, which is why a lot of companies, including the government, hire temp workers. They hire part-time. We don't want you to work over 30 hours. Why do we do all that? Because if we hire you part-time, we hire it so you don't work over 30 hours. We can get rid of that piece, just pay your wage and Social Security. And that's what the firms are setting. Okay. The idea is if they had to provide health insurance for everybody, if they had to provide those benefits, the marginal resource cost would be higher and they wouldn't be able to hire theoretically as many workers. So what does this do? One of the things we think it does is it leads to more part-time and temporary workers. Okay. In the state of Virginia, if you look at most employers have done, things very similar to, the state of Virginia and what have you, and they hire part-time and temp workers so they don't have to pay vet benefits. Another impact, and you really saw this in the early 2000s, is slower wage growth. If I'm covering your health care and this is going up really fast, and I don't want this marginal revenue resource cost, to go up very fast, I have to squeeze something else. I can't squeeze Social Security taxes. I've got to pay those by law. The thing I can do is squeeze the wage. So what was happening from an employer standpoint is the marginal resource cost was going up. Benefits were going up really fast. Wages were not. We think that's one of the reasons why wages didn't go up very fast. Okay. And then finally, it reduces mobility. Okay. We started off the class talking about, the Norway system or a Canadian system, what have you. One of the beautiful benefits that, let's say, Canada has, if they have national health insurance, is if I'm unhappy with my boss, I can tell my boss, pardon my language, screw you, I'm going to go find a different employer. I really don't have to worry about their health insurance plan because I know I'm covered by the national government and the national government plan or their state plan. I don't know how it works up there. Here in the US, where your healthcare is tied to your employer, you got to start to think twice about switching employers. Now, not so much when you're 18, 19, 20, or 24 or 25, you're young, you're relatively healthy, doesn't matter. But when you've got a family and you've got perhaps a child that needs specialized care or a spouse that's diabetic or what have you, all of a sudden you get to the point where you can't switch jobs. You can't switch employers to make more money because you got to worry about what type of health care do you have? What type of health benefits do you have? Okay, that becomes a problem. So it reduces your ability to change jobs. It's also going to destroy eventually government budgets. You saw a couple of minutes ago that some of the biggest costs, some of the biggest payments for health insurance were made by government, Medicare and Medicaid, to the extent all of us baby boomers, I'm about the last of the baby boomers. The last of the baby boomers are going to turn 65 in about the next 5 years. Okay, that'll be the end of the baby boom generation for the most part. You know, you could argue 7, you might be able to go up to as far as 8 years, and then after that, there's not a lot of people. But to the extent you have all of us baby boomers, all of us collecting Social Security and getting on, you know, Medicare, what's going to happen to the federal their budget? So what's going on is that our consumption of healthcare, we buy more at the margin, and it is worth less than the alternative goods and services that the resources could be produced. So what's that mean? We spent 4 chapters saying that, hey, we would like price to equal the marginal cost. What we want to have happen is that the price they charge you equal to the marginal cost. That happened, if you'll recall, in perfect competition. There is no way healthcare is perfect or pure competition. No way whatsoever. So we know that the price is greater than the marginal cost. So you're paying more than it costs them to produce that unit at the margin. And we also know, once again, because it's not pure competition, that price is greater than the minimum of the average total cost. Okay, so could it be done cheaper? And the answer is yes. But those of us that, especially those of you that, you know, where the MRI machine shows up on the back of a semi truck twice a week at the local hospital. I don't know if they're still doing that. I know they were there for a while. It was going between Allegheny and Rockbridge. Then you start, I mean, that's more efficient. But then you wonder, God, what kind of an MRI am I going to get in the back of a semi? Okay. And then the other part of it is, you know, you're taking those MRIs or whatever from 8 till 5, okay, which sounds really good until you realize that, hey, that's only 8 or 9 hours and there's 24 hours in a day. That machinery is really expensive. Could we use it more? You know, could we use it more than just those 8 hours a day? Some other problems. We're unwilling to ration by price and income. I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. I have no problem telling you you can't afford the Ferrari, tough luck. But I don't want to tell somebody, if you can't afford, you know, the best healthcare for your cancer or your heart attack or your kidney issues or whatever other issues, tough luck. God, I'd be heartless. So all of a sudden, everything we were able to do, all the other places, you can't afford steak, tough luck, get hamburger. You can't afford a mansion, tough luck, live in an apartment. We have no problem doing that every place else. You can't afford the MRI to find out what's going on? Oh, God. What are we going to do? Another problem is what we call asymmetric information. And I would argue this is becoming less. The idea behind asymmetric information is there's one group that has a lot of info, and that historically were the doctors, and you had one group with not a lot of info, who were basically uneducated, which is us, you and I. And so what would happen is that we came from a generation or a long time where people didn't question things. The doctor told you to do something, you said, okay. The doctor told you to take this drug, you said, okay. Now the doctor tells you to do something, you go home, maybe you're even while you're sitting there in his office, and you Google it. Okay, hey, what are the implications of taking this drug? What are the side effects of taking this drug? Okay, so it used to be when the doctor told you to, do something, what have you, you just did it, regardless of the cost. Okay, spillover benefits. Go back to the chapter on spillover benefits and spillover costs. Okay, one of the issues we're facing today, and I had the data, The US is about 31%, about a third of people are vaccinated. The beauty of being vaccinated is my vaccination helps y'all, even if you didn't get vaccinated. The problem is with 31%, we don't have enough people vaccinated. We'd be better off as a society if we've had more people vaccinated. And we can't even argue that the issue is cost, because the cost is free. So it's not a matter of cost. What it is a matter of education. Okay. And so the question is as a society, we're better off if everybody gets a vaccination. How are we going to get it there? Another issue is third-party payments. Going back to the chapter before the midterm, we said the marginal utility of good A over the price of A has to equal the marginal utility of good B over the price of B for everything. Well, the problem is when we get to healthcare, which is what this is, you only pay 80%. Or you may even pay just like a $25 copay. So then the denominator here becomes 25 bucks. So now all of a sudden you have a scratch. You have a cough. It cost me 25 bucks. Go to the doctor. No big deal. So you probably go to the doctor more than you would if you were paying the full price. You know, a full price to go visit a primary care physician is probably between 80 and 100 bucks. Okay, that is probably the full price. Yeah, okay, but most of us only pay 25, so we're getting it cheap. Why not? And keep in mind, if you're getting it cheap, why not use a little more? Elasticity, I hope by now you're seeing, good Lord, he is mentioning almost every chapter in the book that we've talked about all semester long. Elasticity matters. The income elasticity is approximately 1. What that means is that your income and your spending on healthcare go up 1 for 1. So if your income goes up 10%, you probably spend about 10% more on healthcare. The price elasticity of demand is estimated to be 0.2. Now, the question is that elastic or inelastic? That is inelastic. So demand is very inelastic. So if the price goes up by 10%, the demand only falls by about 2%. So the doctors can pretty much charge, I hate to say it this way, but I will, or for that matter, to get to our discussion earlier, the drug makers, whatever they want. Because they know that if they raise prices, they're not going to lose many customers. Think about it, folks. You break your arm. You walk into the hospital. They tell you what the charge is going to be, 800 bucks. I don't know. Do you turn around and walk out and go, oh, that's too expensive? And I broke my arm 2 years ago and it was only 200. I'm not paying 800. Or do you let them set your arm? You have a cavity. Do you negotiate the price? Or do you go in and say, fix it? Okay, so the elasticity of demand is inelastic. And the reason why, all of a sudden, everything we talked about before kind of falls in here. It's not a luxury. For the most part, it's a necessity. In fact, I might as well mention this. There are a couple of items in healthcare that have not gone up in price. Those items include LASIK surgery, cosmetic surgery. And you go, okay, why would those not go up in price when everything else is? Because you got to pay for it out of your own pocket. If you have to pay for it out of your own pocket, you're a much better consumer. When you go ahead and get, the LASIK, you see the ads on TV, they'll even finance it. Why? The demand is much more elastic. Keep in mind, there are a few substitutes. You break your arm in Allegheny County. You're either getting it set there or you're traveling to one of the, there's not you're getting it set. There's not a lot of options. Medical treatment for an emergency, you're having a heart attack. You're not going to price check. People prefer long-term relationships. I don't want to have to change doctors and explain everything to them. And finally, insurance. You don't know what it really costs. Okay? Why? Because insurance hides it. A lot of people, and I used to do this in the classroom, what's it cost to go to the doctor? Well, $25. Well, no, it doesn't cost $25. It costs closer to 80 to 100, but all you see is the 25. Some more things on the increasing demand for healthcare. As a society, we're getting older. As you get older, you go to the doctor more. I already talked about asymmetric information. Prices are not publicized, although for hospital care, that's starting to change. Okay. Doctors get paid a fee for a service. There is no incentive, okay, for them not to offer you every service, because every time they add a service, they get paid more. Keep in mind also, there's been, and I don't know if it's the next item, well, we'll put it under defensive medicine. It pays for the doctor doesn't want you to sue them. Makes sense. So when you come in for something, and there's even a remote possibility that a chest x-ray will rule it out, they give you a chest x-ray, or they give you the MRI, or they give you those things. Why? Not because they really think you need it, but because if I don't give you that, and that 1 in 1,000 chance it's that item, that illness, sickness, injury, disease, whatever it might be, you're going to sue me. So what do? I offer that. Okay. And finally, medical ethics, although to some extent this is changing. Okay. But the idea that life should be prolonged as long as possible gets to that discussion board. I don't think too often we have that discussion with the family. Hey, if this treatment costs $100,000 or $200,000 and it gives you an extra 3 weeks of life, do you want it or not? And for a lot of people, that decision is made by Medicare, and in which case it doesn't cost me anything. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody in their discussion board said, hey, if it doesn't cost me anything, what? No harm, no foul. If I'm going to have to spend the money out of my own pocket, now maybe it'd be better off to have my grandkids have it or something like that. Insurance increases the demand for healthcare. Notice all of these items are increasing the demand. Okay, all of these items are increasing the demand. We're taking that downward slope and demand curve and we're shoving it out. Okay, and think about what that happens to that when we run into a supply. Okay, if we keep shoving that demand curve out, what happens to the price? Remember, we put price up here, quantity over there. Okay, insurance plays a role. Okay, insurance plays a role. You're trading a large unknown for a fixed monthly cost. It also has a negative role. Okay, I have had in class smokers tell me, if I get lung cancer, I've got insurance. You go, but that's crazy talk. Yeah, but that's what happens. Okay. I didn't quite make the decision this way, but my daughter was a gymnast. She had more broken bones in her feet and what have you than, what have you. Part of it was, well, let her compete. Let her have fun. That's what she enjoys. I've got insurance. I can cover it. So that's part of the thought process that goes on. And it could also lead to obviously overconsumption. And keep in mind, just to repeat, a lot of those people that are uninsured are relatively young. And finally, government tax policy makes this worse. Health insurance is not taxable. When you get paid with health insurance, there is no tax. So the government is providing a subsidy. So healthcare is bought with before tax dollars. I think I've got some numbers. Yeah. You earn $1. You only get to spend 72 cents because the government taxes it. Instead, what you do is you go to the boss and you say, I don't want the $1, but buy me a bigger, nicer healthcare policy with that $1. So your boss now goes, takes that $1 in pay and goes, spends an extra $1. Would you rather have $1 or 72 cents? Because you only get 72 cents elsewhere. So the government's encouraging it. Okay, the government is encouraging it because it's not taxable. Okay, can you imagine if the government said, okay, now we're going to tax, and for, you know, a family of let's say a family of 4, your healthcare benefits are worth $2 grand a month. That's 24 grand a year. Okay, you have to pay at least $2,400, 10%. That's a minimum. You have to pay $2,400 more in taxes just to have that insurance policy. Nobody in this room is buying or paying or gonna vote for that politician. So notice what happens, okay? Would you pay an insurance company $20 to settle a $50 bill? And the answer is no, that's stupid. But, and this is getting to some of the numbers I was just kind of alluding to, okay? If your boss pays you $70, he's really giving you 75, but after Social Security and state income tax and federal income tax, you may only be able to keep 42. So what do? You tell your boss, no, don't pay me $70. Put that $70 towards insurance. Because that $70 towards insurance is tax-free. Insurance is based upon the law of large numbers, okay? And all insurance, I used to sell insurance, I used to be an insurance underwriter, I know how it's set up. All insurance is based upon the idea of the law of large numbers. And the idea is this, folks. If I have if I spend $1,000 a year on insurance, and I'm thinking here things like homeowners, and I have 200 people pay me. Okay, so I'm insuring 200 homes. I now have $200,000 to spend when that fire happens, that I can pay off that one person, because I know most of the houses aren't going to burn down. Okay, that's what they call the law of large numbers. Well, the problem is, if you're a health insurance company, and you know those 18 to 34-year-olds are not going to be all that keen to spend the money on insurance because they'd much rather go to the Bahamas, and we don't blame them. The only people that are going to come buy the health insurance are those that are either older because they know what can happen, or they're younger and expect, you know, they've got a history, or perhaps their family has a history. So things like, and I've got a slide, the next slide I think covers some government mandates, but things like guaranteed issue. I've got to issue a policy to everybody that comes, okay? Keep in mind, they don't do that with auto insurance. If you have a bad driving record, a DUI, what have you, you have to go to other places other than the normal marketplace to get your insurance. Oh, you can get it, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. Okay? But they don't do that. We don't do that in health insurance, and keep in mind, for good reason. I mean, my argument is everybody has a pre-existing condition. You may not know it, okay, but because of who we are, or what have you, we all have pre-existing conditions, whether it's a family history of cancer or high blood pressure or, kidney disease, or, whatever it might be, we all have it. Okay. And the other thing that what some of these things have done, okay, is things like guaranteed issue. Okay. Guaranteed issue means they have to issue you a policy if you come to them. They don't have to do that in any other industry. Okay. And it's all controlled by the state. You cannot buy insurance out of state. If you're in Virginia, you got to buy insurance through an insurance company licensed in Virginia. Different states have different pastoral care, policy coverage requirements. One of the reasons why we have the cost. In some states, one state, pastoral care. And this is the one, as I was thinking about the lecture today, what have you, mental health is a huge issue. Okay. There are a lot of people that are homeless, living on the streets, dealing with drug issues, whatever, and mental health coverage could probably help them. Then the question comes up, who are we going to allow, permit, pay to take care of these folks? I would argue one might be a pastor. Some people may be uncomfortable going to a doctor and talking about a problem with addiction or perhaps suicide or whatever else their mental health issues might be, but they might feel comfortable going to their pastor. But should pastor, and I don't know the answer to this, as I tell everybody, I know the questions, I don't know the answers. Should pastoral care be covered? Should your preacher be able to file a claim with your insurance company and say, well, I sat down with Mr. Sass, I spent an hour with him, my rates are $100 an hour, so reimburse me $100. I don't know. And then perhaps does it matter if they're Catholic or Lutheran or Presbyterian? What about Jewish? What about Muslim? What about Buddhists? Do they get the coverage too? What about some of those, other religions? Do we cover? I don't know. Great question. Some states require coverage for things like massage therapists, chiropractors, social workers, marriage therapists. Some of these things, especially with mental health being an issue, you go, man, those make sense. But should they be covered under a health insurance policy? I don't know. For the older gentleman, perhaps, hair prostheses. Really? Not sure. Okay. IV fertilization. Hey, that's a huge issue for those couples that struggle to get pregnant. Should it be covered? And keep in mind, when you see this list, keep in mind that if that's covered under an insurance policy and you don't use that, you're helping to pay for it. That's the way the law of large numbers works. Another big problem is that copay, that $25 or whatever it might be. I think for state of Ohio, state of Virginia, it's $25 for primary care, $40 for specialists. But notice what that does. That creates a demand out there, only $25. Okay. But notice what happens when the insurance has to pay for it. The price paid for that by the insurance company is a lot higher. This is a slight lie. There's been no increase in medical school. Now we're talking about supply issues. Okay. Since 80, there's been no increase in medical school graduates. That's false. Virginia Tech was, I believe, the last medical school in the US. And before that, there had been none. Okay. So there have been a couple. I mean, Virginia Tech is the one, but that's, that's it. So we've got a population today of 330 million people, and the number of doctors is not going up. And keep in mind, those doctors that are close to, in the baby boom generation, are getting close to retirement. Slow productivity growth. Go to the doctor. Have them take your blood pressure. They take it the same way they've taken it 100 years. Now, your temperature now, they just scan it across your forehead or what have you. So that's a little different. Okay. But there's been virtually no productivity growth. Okay. There's also been obviously changes in technology, and with insurance, there's an incentive to use more. Okay. Not only are there MRIs now, but there's PET scans. Okay, there's a lot of different things. And finally, the market structure. We have in healthcare either monopolies or oligopolies. There's no way it's pure competition. There's no way it's monopolistic competition. Okay, so what we have are too many hospitals with the same equipment, and it's not efficient. I know, and it was probably about 5 years ago now. Louis Gale, I believe, was trying for neonatal care to replicate what Carillion had. Okay, now I don't know if there's need for both hospitals to have one in Roanoke. I don't know, but if not, you've got a lot of money and time and research into there and experience in that hospital that's not being utilized. Ultimately, we've got to find a reform. Okay, and the reform has to do one of two things. It either has to, one, let the market work, or two, find another way to allocate limited resources. Okay. And that may very well be, what Canada does. Canada allocates scarce resources by a line. My daughter was studied abroad in London. And she goes, Dad, you wouldn't believe, she had to go to the doctor. I think she had some sort of a viral infection. And when you're a student over there, what they do is, like, during those fall in-service type days, or fall, bash days, whatever you want to call them, for when the college kids just come on campus, you sign up for a doctor. So she goes, I signed up for a doctor. She didn't need one until, I don't know, maybe January or whatever. She was over there for a full year. She goes, Dad, you wouldn't believe this. You walk in and they tell you what room to go to, 202, whatever the room number is. And there's 3 chairs sitting out the front of the doctor's office. So you sit in the one, and then what happens is one person gets called in, and you just move down a chair. Okay, so you move down a chair. Ultimately, you're at the first one. They open the door. They say, come on in. You go in. Dad, do they take your temperature? Nope. Do they take your blood pressure? Nope. I go, well, what did they do? And she goes, they just asked me what was wrong. So I told them I was, coughing or what have you. They said, okay. Did they look down my throat? Nope. Gave me a prescription, and I walked out. It's just like an assembly room. They even, assembly line, pardon me, they walked out a different door. Walk in the front door, you talk to the doctor for a minute, or the nurse practitioner, whatever it was. I don't know exactly what it was. And you walk out the back door with a prescription. They didn't even look at her throat. Here in the US, we'd call that malpractice. In England, they call it the National Health Service, healthcare. You got to find a way to allocate a scarce resource if you're not going to let the market work. And keep in mind, I think I've demonstrated we don't let the market work in healthcare. And those trade-offs don't go away, either access versus medical coverage. There are some options, and I'll tell you what my preferred option is here in a minute, although I'm the only one who preaches this one, I think. One is player pay. Okay. You either, buy your health insurance or you pay what have you. And it could be national health insurance, whatever. It will lead to a lower real wage. Why? Because keep in mind, your income is not only your wage, plus your social security tax that your employer has to pay, plus the benefits. If benefits are forced to go up, they're going to have to keep this wage from going up very fast. So it's going to lead to a lower real wage. It will lead, one of the benefits that we've been watching for on Obamacare is greater worker mobility. If you get your health insurance through one of the exchanges, you are no longer tied to your employer. And if your employer pisses you off, you can tell them, screw you, I'm going someplace else. It's going to treat me better. Maybe someplace else where I can make more money. Maybe someplace else that'll use my skills, talents, and abilities better. God bless. That's one of the benefits we were expecting. And I honestly don't know if we, it's I hate to say too early, but it's hard to tell if we've gotten that benefit. Excuse me. Okay. It'll probably lead to higher unemployment. Why? Because their companies won't be able to pay that benefit, so they won't be able to hire people. And the ultimate, in this case, is some form of socialized medicine. Okay. You can use some tax credits or vouchers or national health insurance. Okay. Medicare for all. But keep in mind, if you have Medicare for all, it means you're still going to have to allocate scarce resources. You're just going to allocate them in a different way. Okay. There are some benefits to national health insurance, and other countries in the world have it. Okay. One is England. Okay. It's relatively simple. In many cases, you can choose your own doctor. It reduces cost because you've got, keep in mind, the US may not be able to do this, but in England, they say what they're going to pay for things. The drugs, where we started class today, we're only going to pay X amount for the drug. Okay. And what they'll also do, which they don't necessarily tell you about, is they don't necessarily approve drugs. Okay. I mean, Norway has, as of, the data I was able to find, only 5% of their people vaccinated. Yeah, they've controlled the price. We've got 30%. Some disadvantages in national health insurance. Doctors won't perform some services. I was talking to my mom and she goes, I lost a doctor and he went into this thing. What is he doing? The doctors in some of the big cities in the United States have turned into private doctors. And what they are doing is they are saying, if you pay me $3,000 a year, I will be your private doctor. And by the way, I am only signing this up with 100 families. And when you need me, you can call me 24/7. I'll get you in that day. I'll get you in, almost immediately because I only have 100. Keep in mind, that makes him $300,000 a year. Doesn't have to file forms with Medicare. Doesn't have to worry about insurance. Doesn't have to worry about anybody because these are private folks. Doctors are doing that here in the United States today. Okay. There are doctors that don't take Medicare. Okay. Price ceilings, we learned back in the chapter on supply and demand, don't control cost. They're going to find a way around it. Okay. It'll lead to, or it has led around the world, no guarantees one way or another. Okay. Long lines for care, i.e. Canada. Keep in mind, the federal government is not exactly known for their cost controls. So you're putting them in charge. Probably a mistake. Okay. Recall when we said that we set the marginal benefit equal to the marginal cost. If it costs nothing to go to the doctor, the marginal cost is 0. You are going to find there are some people there every day. In fact, if you talk to some, and I've got some relatives that are emergency room nurses, and they go, you wouldn't believe it. There are some people that are in the emergency room once a week. We are their friends. Okay. They have some mental health issues, what have you, and we become their friends, and they know that it doesn't cost us anything. So they come in to have somebody to talk to. And keep in mind, that means that there's somebody out there that really needs the help. It's not getting helped in a timely manner. Okay. And obviously it has redistribution issues. You can go with things like PPOs, which are preferred provider, or HMOs. You can use deductibles and co-payments and a whole bunch of different things like that. Personally, and this is Mr. Sass trying to get both economics to work and what have you, Mr. Sass's plan would look like this. Everything over, and I'm making up numbers, I have no idea what anything would cost. Everything over 50 grand is covered. And my argument is this: we are a very caring people. Whether it's a tornado that goes through Mississippi, or a hurricane that goes through Florida, or a fire that goes through California, or a flood that goes through, Mississippi, when disaster strikes, we step up. Okay? I would argue cancer, a heart attack, lung transplants are disasters. Now, it's not quite a disaster that makes the news, but it's definitely a disaster for that family. Okay. So I would argue, hey, and I don't know if 50 grand is the right number, I'm just making up a number. Everything over 50 grand is covered. Anything under that, you have two choices. One, you can buy insurance. And I'm going to let the insurance companies decide if they want a $25, copay, or whatever. Some may have zero copays, go to these doctors. Some may have 25 copay. Some may have, a $5,000 deductible, but they'll cover everything from the 5 grand to the 50 grand. Okay, whatever. And then that's option one, is to buy insurance. Option two is to no insurance. And the idea of no insurance is if you don't buy insurance, you've got up to that 50 grand. And, if that means I end up taking your cell phone because you couldn't afford, I'm taking your cell phone, and I'm taking your car, and I'm taking your house, and whatever else. Okay. Keep in mind, from my perspective, that would let the markets work as best as possible. Okay. Why? Because you'd have these folks buying insurance. You'd be leading to hopefully smart consumers. If you ever want to be amazed, talk to somebody who just turned 65 about their health insurance. They have gone 40 or 50 years, maybe even all 65 years, having never even thought about health insurance. Now all of a sudden they have to buy a Medigap policy. Go research it, folks. There's like Medigap policies A through M. Okay, plus the ones you see advertised on TV, which are some version of an HMO or a PPO. There's thousands of alternatives. Why do we let people get to 65 and then figure out how to be consumers? But that's exactly what we do. So that's kind of the Mr. Sass option. Some sort of a big cap to cover catastrophes, and then encourage and offer incentives for the, those folks to buy insurance. Okay. Bottom line is that unless we're willing to decide who will and who will not get health care, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to decide who's going to be on the ventilator and who's not. We need to let the market in. Okay. And we need you and I to make choices based on marginal benefit, marginal cost. We need you and I to make choices, the same choices we use to buy gas, we ought to be using in healthcare. Questions? If not, this is the, oops. The end of econ class. Today was the last class, and so it's the end of the econ class. You have two things left to do. Item one is you need to complete the homework, and it opened up while we were in the lecture today. You have to complete the homework on healthcare. And two, you need to take the final exam. Both of these opened up about an hour ago. Okay, rules for the final exam. It's open book, open note, just like the midterm. Once you start, you have to finish. So you can't come back to it. So make sure you've got the time to do it. Okay, once you start, you've got to finish. And you have 2.5 hours. It's 150 minutes to complete. And it's drawing. I've picked out, I think it's got about 50 questions, thereabouts, maybe 55, 52, somewhere. It's got between 50 and 55 questions, and 2.5 hours is really plenty of time. And it must be completed, both these items have to be completed by next Tuesday at 1 p.m. At 1 p.m., I'm going to put together grades and what have you. So has to be done by next Tuesday at 1. Questions?